You know, Russia's involvement in Syria has to be looked upon from a certain perspective. We have to remember that Russia has been involved with Syria for the last more than 40 years. So it's nothing new for Russia to come in. What President Putin has, of course, discerned two important things. One is that because Obama's inaction in Syria, he created a certain gap, and Putin was more than happy and willing to come in and fill in that gap. But even more important than that, Assad military has been losing tremendous ground. And for all intent and purposes, the Assad government controls no more than 20% of Syria. So the Russians were extremely concerned that the Assad government may collapse. And so that was a very good reason for them to come in and augment the Syrian forces, introduce the Russian Air Force, bring in tanks, and as well as ground troops in order to boost, to strengthen Assad forces and to prevent the collapse of his government. All of this is, of course, is done under the guise that Russia is actually also fighting ISIS. There is an element of that, I must say, because there is genuine concern that ISIS also targeting places in the Caucasus that may undermine severely Russian interest in that part of the world. So for Putin, the situation in Syria presented another opportunity for Russia to further entrench itself. And we have gotten now to a point where there will be no solution, in my view, to the Syrian conflict unless Russia becomes very much part and parcel of that solution. Well, for nearly 5 years now, since the civil war erupted, Syria is on the verge of almost complete disintegration. And then you have now, of course, the phenomenon of the rise of ISIS. So the question is, how do you go about solving this an extraordinary complex situation when you have more than 50 extremist groups converge on Syria, when Syria has become the battleground between the Sunni and the Shia, when you have ISIS making every effort to try to establish an Islamic State, extending from Syria all the way to Iraq, and they are in control, in a very significant swath of land in both countries. So in order to begin to think in terms of a solution, you have to focus first on ISIS. That is, ISIS need to be defeated. When I say focus, it does not mean you let the other part of the Syria continue to unravel. As you deal effectively with ISIS, which in my view requires significant ground troops, you're going to have to think in terms of what kind of a solution we have to find to end this civil war. And to that end, I believe that Russia and Iran must be part and parcel of that solution, and that is by establishing perhaps some kind of representative government to be there for transitional period, perhaps for 5 to 7 years, and maybe not President Assad will have to stay in power for a year or two. That is, we have to think more creatively in terms of what to do, but it's going to take a collaborative effort of all the states that have serious stake in Syria, and that include, needless to say, Russia, Iran, the United States, Saudi Arabia, and others. But we have also to keep in mind that all of these significant players have different agenda, and that makes the things extremely difficult. But it has to be done, or else the entire Middle East will continue to be in turmoil for years, if not decades to come. Anyone who's been watching the actions or inactions of the Obama administration will tell you that this administration has had and still does not have a real strategy to be able to effectively deal with the crisis in Syria. And that is most unfortunate. Obama came to power rather burned because of what's been going on in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and he shied away, and still does, from getting involved in another country. So his lukewarm involvement in Syria has come too little and too late. So now the United States ought to rethink its position vis-a-vis Syria, what to do, and what kind of strategy need to be developed in order to effectively bring about some kind of sustainable solution to this horrifying conflict that is getting worse day after day. And to that end, again, we have to look at the players in the region and make sure that those who can have impact or can affect what's going on in Syria be part and parcel of that solution. And here again, there's a conflicting interest between the various players, be that the Saudis, the Iranian, Russian, United States, and others. And that is again making the situation very, very difficult. But going back to the initial question that we asked, is there a strategy? There is no strategy. And my understanding now from people that I spoke to in the State Department is, in fact, the Obama administration now is, they're sitting down and thinking of what sort of strategy need to be developed, and it is probably in the process. How effective that might be, only time will tell. Well, the P5+1 worked in connection with the Iran deal, and successfully so. The +1 was Germany. In this particular case, you're probably going to have to P5+2 or maybe even 3, and that means Iran, Saudi Arabia as well, because they are very much concerned and have major stakes in the outcome in Syria. So this is another possibility, yes. It is the powers that have specifically the 5 major powers certainly can be extremely helpful should they focus and decide that a solution has to be brought about. But unfortunately, unlike the Iran deal, where all 5 powers were interested in preventing Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon, in this particular case, there's a serious differences of opinion and positions between these 2 powers. And that is going to be a problem here. Unlike, again, the Iran deal, the collaborative effort that is needed to achieve a solution to the Syrian crisis may not be present if we were to duplicate the efforts that were made in connection with the Iran nuclear deal.